The council chamber stretched beyond what human eyes could comfortably see. 12-year-old one pressed her face against the transparent wall of the observation gallery, watching thousands of alien beings fill the massive space below. Some floated in special atmospheric bubbles. Others stood on platforms designed for their unique bodies. A few existed as pure energy, contained in crystalline vessels that hummed with soft light. This was her first time attending the Galactic Assembly with her mother. Ambassador sat in the human delegation section far below, her black suit looking plain among the elaborate alien garments and biological displays. One felt a flutter of pride. Her mother represented all of Earth in this place, where hundreds of worlds gathered to share knowledge. The symposium's topic appeared on translation screens throughout the chamber in thousands of languages. Cognitive training across species, a universal standard. One didn't fully understand what that meant, but she knew it had something to do with intelligence and learning. A tall alien walked to the central platform. His name appeared on one's translator earpiece as X, a scientist. His skin shimmered like oil on water, constantly shifting between purple and green. 4 arms gestured as he spoke, his voice translated into smooth, confident tones. Honored delegates, today I present the culmination of 50 cycles of research. We have studied cognitive training capability across 3,000 species. The results reveal clear patterns about which beings possess the neural architecture necessary for genuine learned behavior. A massive hologram materialized above the platform. It showed a complex chart with species names, brain scans, and color-coded markers. One leaned forward, searching for Earth. There it was, near the bottom, marked in bright red. The red classification indicates species whose neural structures are incompatible with true cognitive training. X continued. His tone carried a hint of pity. These beings operate on instinct alone. Any apparent learned behavior is merely genetic programming, responding to environmental stimuli. The hologram changed to show video footage. One recognized dolphins leaping through water while alien researchers tried to communicate with them using lights and sounds. The dolphins seemed to ignore everything, just swimming in circles. Next came footage of chimpanzees throwing objects randomly in a laboratory, appearing confused and chaotic. Then dogs running wildly, barking at nothing. As you can see, X said, Earth's fauna demonstrate no capacity for understanding abstract concepts, following novel instructions, or retaining learned behaviors over time. They are primitive organisms, fascinating in their biological diversity, but fundamentally untrainable. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Many heads bobbed in what one assumed was agreement. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. Those videos didn't look right. The dolphins in documentaries she'd watched were graceful and smart. The dogs she'd met were loyal and clever. Something about this presentation felt wrong. Another alien rose from a seat near the front. A council member, towered over most other beings. His reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile. I move that we formally classify Earth's animal species as Class 7 non-sentient. This will prevent future research waste and establish clear guidelines for how these creatures may be utilized. One didn't understand all the words, but utilized sounded bad. She looked down at her mother. Ambassador sat very still, her face unreadable. Other human delegates whispered urgently to each other. Furthermore, continued, his voice dripping with condescension, humanity's emotional attachment to these primitive beasts is well documented. While we find it quaint, we must not allow sentiment to interfere with scientific classification. No Earth creature has ever demonstrated genuine learned behavior beyond basic survival instincts. They are incapable of abstract thought, problem-solving, or meaningful communication. The assembly erupted in discussion. One watched alien after alien speak in agreement. A few voiced hesitation, but most seemed eager to close the matter. The Speaker of the Council, an ancient being whose species one couldn't identify, raised a glowing appendage for silence. "Are there any objections to this classification?" the speaker asked. The translation made the voice sound tired, as if this was a mere formality. One looked at her mother again. Ambassador remained seated, but her jaw was tight. She was preparing to object, to argue, to present evidence. One knew that expression. Her mother would fight this, but she would need proof they didn't have immediately available. The speaker began to call for a vote. Something hot and fierce bloomed in one's chest. She thought about Boram, about the garden, about all those afternoons proving everyone wrong. She thought about how her grandfather had smiled when he said, "They don't understand what they're looking at." One stood up. The movement caught the attention of nearby observers. Then more eyes turned toward the observation gallery. One's legs shook, but her voice came out clear and strong, amplified by the gallery's automatic translation system. "That's not true. My mom taught one tricks." The entire chamber fell silent. Thousands of alien faces and faces that weren't faces at all turned to stare at her. One's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. But she didn't sit down. X's 4 arms crossed over his chest. "A child speaks. This is highly irregular." "Let the young human speak," someone called from the assembly floor. One couldn't see who. The speaker's glowing form pulsed thoughtfully. "The human child has invoked testimonial privilege. She may address the assembly. State your name and your claim, young one." One swallowed hard. "My name is One. I'm 12 years old." And 5 years ago, my mother taught a crow to solve puzzles, follow commands, and communicate. A real Earth crow from our world. She learned tricks. She understood things. She was smart. Laughter rippled through parts of the chamber. His voice boomed over the noise. The fantasies of a child. This is exactly the kind of emotional delusion we must rise above. I demand we proceed with the vote immediately. But Ambassador stood now, her voice cutting through the chaos. The Council Charter allows for evidence submission in response to testimonial claims. My daughter speaks the truth. We can provide proof of genuine cognitive training in an Earth species. X's shimmer darkened to an angry purple. Then provide it now, Ambassador. Show us this miraculous trained creature. Met his gaze steadily. The subject is on Earth. We would need 1 week to return and demonstrate. The chamber exploded into argument. Some delegates shouted that this was a delay tactic. Others demanded to see this supposed evidence, called it a waste of the council's time. The speaker raised multiple appendages, and silence gradually returned. The ancient being seemed to consider carefully. This is most unusual. However, the charter is clear. If humanity claims evidence exists, they must be given opportunity to present it. 1 week is granted. If at that time no satisfactory proof is demonstrated, the classification will proceed immediately, and humanity will face censure for false testimony. One felt her mother's eyes on her from across the vast chamber. When their gazes met, Ambassador wasn't angry. Instead, a small smile touched her lips. She knew exactly which crow one meant. X's voice dripped with satisfaction. 1 week then. I look forward to witnessing humanity's humiliation when they arrive empty-handed or with some sad, trained-to-beg pet. True cognitive training requires proof of abstract reasoning, novel problem-solving, and retention over significant time periods. No Earth animal has ever demonstrated such capabilities. As the assembly adjourned, one sank back into her seat. What had she done? She just committed Earth to proving something before the entire galaxy. If they failed, it wouldn't just be embarrassing. It would affect how every alien species saw Earth's creatures forever. But she thought about Boram again. About those bright, intelligent eyes. About the way the crow had figured out puzzles that even one hadn't immediately understood. About the gift-giving, the communication, the friendship. If Boram was still alive, if Boram still remembered, if they could find her in time. One closed her eyes and hoped she hadn't just made the biggest mistake of her life. 5 years earlier, 7-year-old one had hated the new house. Everything about it felt wrong. The coastal town was too quiet compared to Seoul. She didn't know anyone. Her mother was always busy with important space agency work, preparing for humanity's first contact with alien civilizations. And worst of all, They'd moved in with Grandfather Young, who spent all his time in his garden talking to plants. The garden itself was wild and overgrown. Grandfather Young called it natural, but one thought it looked messy. Vines climbed over old stone walls. Berry bushes tangled with vegetable plants. A crooked pine tree dominated one corner, its branches reaching toward the sea. Most people think gardens should be controlled, Grandfather said one morning as one picked at her breakfast. But the best things happen when you let nature be itself. One didn't answer. She missed her old friends. She missed her old school. She missed everything. The storm came that afternoon without warning. Wind ripped through the garden, bending the pine tree until one thought it might break. Rain hammered against the windows. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. One went outside to see the damage. Leaves and small branches littered the ground. That's when she heard it, a weak, desperate cawing sound coming from behind the berry bushes. She found the crow there, one wing bent at a terrible angle. Black feathers were matted with rain and blood. But what caught one's attention was a distinctive white patch on the injured wing, shaped almost like a star. "Grandfather," she shouted. Young came quickly for an old man. He knelt beside the injured bird, his weathered hands gentle. "Ah, poor thing. The wing is badly damaged." "Can we help it?" one asked. Most people would say no. Wild birds don't survive injuries like this, and even if they do, they don't trust humans. He looked at one with his sharp, intelligent eyes. "But we're not most people, are we?" They brought the crow inside in a cardboard box lined with soft cloth. Grandfather Young splinted the wing with careful precision, his hands steady despite his age. The crow watched them with one bright eye, too hurt to struggle much. "She'll need time to heal," Grandfather said, "and she'll need someone to care for her. Are you willing to do that, one?" One nodded. She had nothing else to do anyway. They set up a large cage in the garden shed. The crow, one decided to call her Boram, after an aunt she'd loved, spent the first week just resting. One brought her food and water twice a day. At first, Boram would shrink away whenever one approached, but hunger eventually overcame fear. When her mother came home from the space agency that weekend, she found one sitting outside the shed, reading to Boram through the wire mesh. "You know the bird can't understand you," said, not unkindly. "Maybe not the words," one replied, "but Grandfather says she can understand the intention." Looked skeptical but didn't argue. She had bigger concerns. Humanity's first diplomatic contact with an alien species was happening in 6 months, and she was on the preparation team. As weeks passed, Boram's wing healed. Grandfather Young examined it carefully. The bones mended, but not perfectly. She'll never fly long distances. If we release her, she won't survive in the wild. One felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. She'd grown attached to the crow. Boram would hop to the cage door whenever one approached now, cawing softly in greeting. "What do we do?" one asked. Grandfather smiled mysteriously. "We give her a choice. We leave the cage open. If she wants to leave, she can. If she wants to stay, we make her part of our family." They opened the cage the next morning. Boram hopped out cautiously, testing her wings. She could fly, but only in short bursts, and the effort clearly tired her. She explored the garden for hours while one watched anxiously. At sunset, Boram returned to the shed and went back into her cage to sleep. "She's chosen," Grandfather said simply. Things changed after that. Grandfather Young taught one to treat Boram not as a pet but as a companion. "Don't train her like she's a dog," he said. "Crows are different. They're problem solvers. They're thinkers. Try to communicate with her, not command her." One didn't fully understand, but she tried. She started leaving small objects near Boram's feeding station: shiny buttons, colorful stones, pieces of string. One morning, she found a bottle cap placed carefully next to her breakfast bowl. "Boram brought me a gift," she told Grandfather excitedly. "And what will you give her in return?" he asked. One thought about it, then left Boram's favorite treat, dried mealworms, in the spot where she'd found the bottle cap. The next day there was a smooth pebble, then a piece of sea glass, then a lost earring that had belonged to one's grandmother. Each gift was more thoughtfully chosen than the last. "She's not just collecting shiny things randomly," observed one evening, watching through the kitchen window. "She's choosing items that mean something." Grandfather nodded. "Boram understands that gifts create bonds. She's making herself part of our family in the way her kind knows how." One started creating simple puzzles. She put treats in boxes with easy latches. Boram figured out the first one in minutes, using her beak to flip the simple hook. One made them progressively harder: boxes within boxes, sliding panels, rotating mechanisms. Boram approached each puzzle with visible concentration. Sometimes she'd try a method, fail, step back and study the problem from a different angle before trying again. That was thinking, one realized. Real, actual thinking. The breakthrough came 6 months after they'd found Boram. One had created a complex puzzle box with 3 colored panels: red, blue, and green. Only the green panel, when pressed in the right sequence with the 2 buttons beside it, would open the box. One demonstrated once slowly. Press the left button, press the green panel, press the right button. The box opened. She reset it and stepped back. Boram studied the box. She pressed the red panel. Nothing happened. She tried the blue panel. Nothing. Then she pressed the left button, the green panel, and the right button in exact sequence. The box opened. "Did you see that?" one shouted. "Mom, grandfather, Boram solved it." Came running from her office. "Do it again. I need to record this." One reset the box. Boram solved it again, faster this time, pulled out her phone and recorded the next attempt. Then she created a new pattern, right button, green panel, left button. Boram watched carefully, then replicated it perfectly. "This is extraordinary," breathed. "She's not just repeating a trained behavior. She's learning patterns and adapting to new instructions." They spent the evening testing Boram's abilities. The crow could differentiate between colors, understand sequences, and even seemed to grasp the concept of same and different. When presented with 3 objects where 2 matched, Boram consistently indicated the matching pair. Grandfather Young watched with quiet satisfaction. "I told you, we're not training her. We're learning to speak each other's languages." Over the next year, One and Boram's communication grew more sophisticated. One developed a series of hand gestures, each meaning something specific. One gesture meant food. Another meant water. A sweeping motion meant fly free and explore. Boram learned them all. More than that, she began to initiate interactions, using her own sounds and movements to communicate desires and observations. When strangers approached the garden, Boram would make a specific harsh call. When grandfather brought out her favorite treats, she'd do a little hop dance. But the most remarkable thing happened one afternoon when one was sad about still not fitting in at school. She sat in the garden crying softly. Boram hopped over and gently tugged at her sleeve, then presented her with a smooth, beautiful piece of blue sea glass. It was comfort, it was empathy, it was friendship. Watched the interaction and felt her skepticism finally crumble. This wasn't a trained animal performing tricks for rewards. This was a genuine relationship between 2 intelligent beings who happened to be different species. She recorded everything. Hours of footage showing Boram solving problems, learning new patterns, and communicating meaningfully with One. As someone preparing humanity for contact with alien intelligence, realized they'd been overlooking intelligence right here on Earth. Then came the news that would change everything. Was offered the position of Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Coalition. It was an honor beyond measure, but it meant leaving Earth. It meant leaving the garden. It meant leaving Boram. One's world collapsed. "I can't leave her," she sobbed. "She's my friend." "I know," said gently, "but we can't take her with us. The stress of space travel, the artificial environments, it wouldn't be fair to Boram." Grandfather Young promised to care for Boram, but it wasn't the same. On their last day, One went through their routine one final time. Every puzzle, every gesture, every moment of communication. At the end, she made the sweeping gesture that meant fly free. Boram cawed softly. The sound one had learned meant friend, and watched from her favorite perch on the fence as they left. The transport vessel sliced through hyperspace, its destination Earth. Inside the ship's main cabin, one sat with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the swirling colors outside the viewport. 3 days of travel stretched ahead of them. 3 days to prepare. 3 days to worry. Captain Wu entered the cabin, his military bearing softened by concern. "Ambassador, we're receiving transmissions from the galactic networks. The story has spread faster than expected." Looked up from her tablet where she'd been reviewing the old footage of Boram. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Show me." The captain activated the wall display. News feeds from dozens of alien worlds scrolled past, all discussing the same topic. The translations varied, but the tone was consistent. Most were mocking. "Human child makes wild claim about primitive Earth creature." Read one headline. "Desperate humanity resorts to children's stories," proclaimed another. A news commentator appeared on screen, his shimmering skin bright with amusement. Sources close to Scientist X confirm that his research is absolutely conclusive. Earth fauna lack the neural complexity for genuine cognitive training. This appears to be nothing more than a delay tactic by an embarrassed species. One felt her stomach twist. What had she done? She'd stood up in front of the entire galaxy and made a promise she might not be able to keep. "Turn it off," said quietly. But the damage was done. As the journey continued, the transmissions kept coming. Some were worse than others. Had given an interview where he wagered publicly that humanity would fail. "When they arrive empty-handed," he said, his reptilian features twisted in satisfaction, "we will finally establish that Earth's sentimental attachment to lesser creatures has no basis in fact." Not all the news was bad. Dr. Sora, the ships, showed them a transmission from a smaller species called the. Their representative had released a statement supporting Earth's right to present evidence. "We should not rush to judgment about intelligence we do not fully understand," the delegate had said. "They're not alone," Dr. Sora explained, pulling up more feeds. "At least 6 other species have quietly expressed support. Smaller species mostly. Ones without much political power in the coalition." "Why would they care?" one asked. Dr. Sora's expression turned thoughtful. "Maybe they have their own doubts about the intelligence classifications. Maybe they've noticed things on their own worlds that don't fit the accepted theories." Captain Wu pulled up a chair beside one. His usually stern face was gentler than she'd ever seen it. "My family raised rescue dogs for 3 generations," he said. "Dogs that found people trapped under collapsed buildings. Dogs that detected medical emergencies before they happened. Dogs that comforted traumatized children when no human could reach them." Really? One asked. He nodded. I've seen intelligence in Earth's animals my whole life. Not the same as human intelligence, maybe, but real understanding, real emotion, real problem solving. So I believe in what you said back there. I believe in Boram. His words helped, but they couldn't erase the fundamental problem. That night, as Wynne tried to sleep in her small cabin, she heard her mother and Dr. Sora talking in the corridor outside. We need to discuss the elephant in the room, Dr. Sora said. Crows live 10 to 15 years in the wild. It's been 5 years since you left Earth. Boram was already an adult when one found her. The odds that she's still alive. I know, said softly. Even if she is alive, there's no guarantee she'll remember. 5 years is a long time. And even if she remembers, will she still be able to perform? Age affects all creatures. Her cognitive abilities might have declined. One pressed her hands over her ears, not wanting to hear more, but the doubts had already planted themselves in her mind. What if Boram had died? What if she'd forgotten? What if age and time had erased everything they'd built together? The next day, one barely spoke. She helped Dr. Sora recreate the puzzle boxes from memory, but her hands shook as she worked. Dr. Sora tried to comfort her, but there was no hiding the truth. They were gambling everything on a hope. More news arrived. X had released a detailed breakdown of why Earth animals couldn't possibly demonstrate genuine intelligence. The neural pathways were wrong, he explained with charts and scans. The brain structures were insufficient. Any appearance of learned behavior was simply conditioned response to stimuli, no different from a plant growing toward light. He's so certain, one whispered. That's what worries me, admitted. X has staked his entire reputation on this classification. If we prove him wrong, the consequences for him would be severe. He's not going to make it easy for us. Captain Wu brought more concerning news on the second day. We're being followed. 3 observation vessels picked us up at the hyperspace boundary. They're not interfering, but they're clearly monitoring our every move. X wants to make sure we don't cheat, Dr. Sora said grimly. He'll claim any preparation we do in advance is manipulation of results. Can we even prepare? One asked. Won't that invalidate the test? Considered this carefully. We can prepare the testing materials. We can't prepare Boram. The demonstration has to show her natural abilities, not coached responses. That night one couldn't sleep at all. She kept imagining arriving at grandfather's garden to find it empty. Or worse, finding Boram but having the crow look at her like a stranger. 5 years was more than a third of one's entire life. How much had she changed? How much had Boram? On the third day, as Earth grew larger in the viewport, the transmissions reached a fever pitch. News drones from dozens of species were already circling Earth's atmosphere, waiting for permission to enter. The whole galaxy, it seemed, was watching. "This is unprecedented," Captain Wu said. "I've never seen this much attention on a single event. The coalition is treating this like a major diplomatic incident." "Because it is," replied. "If we succeed, it calls into question the intelligence classifications of thousands of species across hundreds of worlds. Every species will have to reconsider the animals on their own planets. The political and economic implications are staggering." "And if we fail?" one asked quietly. No one answered. As they entered Earth's atmosphere, Dr. Sora sat beside one. "I want you to understand something," the scientist said. "Regardless of what happens today, what you and Boram accomplished was real. The videos your mother took show genuine cognitive ability. Even if we can't demonstrate it again, that doesn't erase what happened." "But no one will believe us," one said. "Some will. The ones who matter will." The ship landed near the coastal town where one had lived. As the ramp lowered, one saw the change immediately. What had been a quiet, forgotten place was now surrounded by hovering camera drones. Alien reporters stood behind barriers, their various forms glittering in the afternoon sun. Grandfather Young waited at the edge of the landing field. He looked older, more frail than one remembered, but his eyes were still sharp, still intelligent. "Grandfather," one ran to him, and he caught her in a tight embrace. "Oh, the garden is ready," he said softly. "I've kept it just as you left it." "Is Boram?" One couldn't finish the question. Grandfather's expression was unreadable. "Come and see." They walked through the town in a strange procession, and Dr. Sora carried the testing equipment. Captain Wu and two crew members managed the recording devices. Grandfather led them down familiar streets toward the old house. The garden looked the same, wild, overgrown, beautiful in its chaos. The pine tree still reached toward the sea. The berry bushes still tangled with the vegetables. Grandfather's old fence still bordered the property, weathered by 5 years of coastal storms. One's heart pounded so hard she felt dizzy. She stepped into the garden, the camera drones hovering at a respectful distance. Dr. Sora set up the testing area, positioned the recording equipment. Everything was ready. Except Boram. One walked to the center of the garden, to the spot where she'd stood so many times before. She took a deep breath and raised her hand in the opening gesture of their old routine. The gesture that had always meant, "Friend is here." Nothing happened. The seconds stretched into eternity. One's arm began to shake. She heard alien commentators beginning their mockery through the drone speakers. This was it. This was the moment her hope would die. Then from the old pine tree at the garden's edge came a sound. A harsh, familiar caw that made one's heart leap. A crow landed on the fence post, the exact post Bahram had always chosen. The bird had a distinctive white patch on one wing, shaped like a star. But 5 years had passed. Was it really Bahram, or just another crow? One's hands trembled as she made the second gesture, the one that meant, "Do you remember?" The crow cocked its head, watching her with one bright, intelligent eye. Then it opened its beak and made a sound, a specific pattern of caws that one had taught her years ago. The sound that meant friend. One's eyes filled with tears. "Bahram," she whispered, "you remember." The garden had become a stage. Camera drones from across the galaxy hovered in careful formation, their lenses focused on the crow perched on the old fence post. One could feel the weight of billions of eyes watching through those cameras. Her hands had stopped shaking. Bahram was here. Bahram remembered. That was all that mattered. Dr. Sora set up the first test station. It was the puzzle box one remembered best, a wooden container with a sliding latch mechanism. Inside, visible through a clear panel, was a handful of dried mealworms, Bahram's favorite treat. "We'll start with something familiar," Dr. Sora explained into the recording device. "This puzzle requires the subject to slide the latch to the left, then lift the lid. It demonstrates understanding of sequential actions and mechanical cause and effect." One made the gesture for puzzle and stepped back. Bahram hopped down from the fence post and approached the box. She circled it once, examining it from all angles. Then, with deliberate precision, she used her beak to slide the latch left and flipped the lid open with one claw. The whole process took less than 10 seconds. "Simple conditioning," came X's voice through one of the drone speakers. He was watching from the Galactic Council chamber, his transmission overlaid on the live feed. "Any creature can be trained to repeat a specific action for food rewards. This proves nothing." Dr. Sora nodded as if she'd expected this response. "Let's try something more complex then." She brought out the color-coded box, the one with red, blue, and green panels. "This puzzle requires pattern recognition and memory. The subject must press buttons in a specific sequence. 3 buttons, 3 different possible sequences. We'll demonstrate one sequence, then ask the subject to replicate it." Stepped forward and slowly pressed the left button, the green panel, then the right button. The box clicked open. She closed it and reset the mechanism. One gestured to Bahram. The crow studied the box for a moment, then precisely replicated the sequence. Left button, green panel, right button. The box opened. "Now she'll learn a different sequence," Dr. Sora said. She demonstrated. Right button, blue panel, left button. Bahram watched carefully. When the box was reset, she performed the new sequence without error. Still just repetition, X insisted, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. Show the same box repeatedly, and any creature will eventually mimic the correct movements. Captain Wu spoke up. Then let's eliminate repetition. Doctor, do we have materials for a new puzzle? Dr. Sora's eyes lit up. She quickly assembled a different puzzle from spare parts, a box with colored blocks that needed to be stacked in a specific order to release a lid. This is completely new. One has never seen this puzzle before, which means the subject has never seen it either. There's been no opportunity for training or conditioning. She demonstrated the solution. Stack the blocks red, then blue, then green. The weight of the stacked blocks triggered a release mechanism, and the lid popped open. One cannot help because she doesn't know there's an alternative solution, Dr. Sora explained. The subject must figure this out independently. The garden fell silent except for the gentle rustling of leaves. Boram approached the new puzzle slowly. She studied it from multiple angles. She pecked experimentally at one block, then another. Minutes passed. One's heart raced. What if Boram couldn't solve it? What if this was too different from anything they'd practiced? Then Boram did something unexpected. She picked up a small twig from the ground, one of many scattered around the garden. She used it to prod the release mechanism from the side, testing how it worked. Remarkable, Dr. Sora breathed. She's investigating the mechanism itself, not just trying random combinations. Boram discarded the twig and began working with the blocks. She tried stacking them in different orders, blue, red, green. Nothing happened. Green, red, blue. Nothing. Then, after another pause to study the mechanism, she tried red, blue, green. The lid popped open. But she hadn't just replicated the demonstrated solution. She'd explored the problem systematically, tested the mechanism, and arrived at the answer through reasoning. That's problem solving, Captain Wu said firmly. That's genuine cognition. X's voice came back, but now it sounded strained. The subject got lucky. One successful attempt doesn't prove systematic intelligence. Then we'll test memory retention over time, said. She pulled out a device that hadn't been in their original equipment. Her old tablet, the one she'd used to record Boram years ago. Dr. Sora, I have video here of puzzles we used 5 years ago. Puzzles Boram hasn't seen since one left Earth. If she can still solve them, that demonstrates long-term memory of learned behaviors. She set up a puzzle box that appeared in the old videos, one with a rotating mechanism and 3 separate latches. According to notes, Boram had learned to solve this particular puzzle 7 months before they'd left Earth. That was over 5 years ago. One held her breath as Boram examined the box. Would she remember? So much time had passed. Boram hopped around the box once. Then, without hesitation, she began working through the solution. Rotate the disc clockwise, flip the first latch, rotate counterclockwise, flip the second latch, push the third latch up. The box opened. She remembered. After 5 years, she remembered. Long-term memory retention, Dr. Sora said, her voice thick with emotion. This is extraordinary. But the most remarkable moment was yet to come. As Dr. Sora was preparing another test, something happened that no one had planned. 6 more crows landed in the garden. They perched on the fence, on the pine tree branches, on the old stone wall. All of them watched Bahram intently. Grandfather Young spoke for the first time since the demonstration began. They've been coming around more in recent months. At first, I thought they were just a flock that Bahram had joined. But then I noticed something strange. He gestured to the berry bushes. One looked closer and saw something she'd missed, puzzle elements scattered around the garden. Simple ones made from natural materials. A bent wire hook, a wooden toggle, a stone balanced on a branch. Bahram has been creating puzzles. One asked in amazement. Watch, Grandfather said. One of the new crows hopped down to a berry bush where a simple wire hook held a small container closed. The crow studied it for a moment, then carefully manipulated the hook with its beak. The container opened, revealing seeds inside. Another crow approached a different puzzle, a sliding mechanism made from smooth stones. It took longer, but eventually, this crow also solved it. Dr. Sora's hands shook as she recorded. This is cultural transmission. Bahram is teaching other crows. She's passing on learned behaviors to her flock. Impossible, X sputtered. Crows don't have the social structures for knowledge transfer. Apparently they do, said quietly. We just never bothered to look closely enough. Dr. Sora examined the natural puzzles more carefully. These aren't random. Look at this progression, from simple hooks to more complex mechanisms. It's a teaching curriculum. Bahram is intentionally creating increasingly difficult challenges for the other crows to learn from. The implications crashed over one like a wave. Bahram hadn't just remembered what she'd learned. She'd built on it. She'd grown. She'd become a teacher herself. This changes everything, Captain Wu said. This isn't just about one trained animal. This is evidence of emergent intelligence in a wild population. Through the drone speakers, the alien commentators had fallen silent. For the first time since the demonstration began, no one was mocking. The footage of 7 crows working through puzzles, of Bahram's teaching system, of genuine problem-solving and knowledge transfer. It was undeniable. Finally, X's voice returned, but it was different now. Smaller, uncertain. This will require further study. The implications are, I need to review my data. voice came next, angry and defensive. So one Earth creature shows some cognitive ability. This doesn't invalidate the entire classification system. But before anyone could respond, a new transmission interrupted the feeds. The symbol that appeared made even Captain Wu straighten in surprise. It was the seal of the Conclave, one of the oldest and most reclusive species in the galaxy. A gentle voice spoke, translated into every language simultaneously. We would like to request a private audience with Ambassador and her delegation. We have information relevant to this matter. Information we have kept hidden for 3,000 years. The garden fell silent. Even the crows seemed to sense that something important had just happened. One looked at Boram, who had returned to her favorite fence post. The crow met her eyes, and one could swear she saw understanding there. Not just animal awareness, but genuine intelligence recognizing intelligence. "We did it," one whispered. "We proved them wrong." But as she would soon learn, they'd done more than that. They'd opened a door that had been closed for, and what lay beyond would change the galaxy forever. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so crowded. Every delegation seat was filled, and overflow attendees floated in designated zones throughout the vast space. 3 days had passed since Boram's demonstration, and in that time, the galaxy had talked about nothing else. One sat in the observation gallery again, but this time she wasn't alone. Grandfather Young sat beside her, his old hands folded peacefully in his lap. On her other side, Dr. Sora reviewed notes on her tablet, preparing for what was to come. Below, Ambassador stood at the human delegation podium, waiting for the session to begin. The tension in the chamber was thick enough to cut. Half the delegations looked angry. The other half looked nervous. Everyone looked uncomfortable. The council speaker called the assembly to order. "We gather today to address matters raised by the human demonstration. Before we proceed with formal discussion, the conclave has requested to speak. We grant them the floor." An ancient being glided to the central platform. Her name was In, and according to the information one had looked up, she was over 600 years old. Her species resembled floating jellyfish made of crystalline structures that chimed softly as she moved. 3,000 years ago, In began, her voice carrying a weight of profound sadness. "My people made a choice. A terrible choice that has haunted us ever since." The chamber fell absolutely silent. "We shared our world with beings we called the Singers. They lived in our oceans, massive creatures with complex vocalizations. They created art from sound. They had families, communities, culture. But we told ourselves they were just animals, just ocean creatures, not truly intelligent." In's crystalline form dimmed. We told ourselves this because acknowledging their intelligence would have meant sharing our world equally, sharing resources, sharing our claim to space exploration. So we classified them as non-sentient fauna. We fished their waters until the singers had no food. We polluted their breeding grounds with our industries. And by the time we realized what we'd done, it was too late. She activated a holographic display. Images appeared of graceful, enormous creatures moving through alien waters. Their size was stunning, but what captured everyone's attention was the complexity of their behavior. The footage showed them creating patterns in bioluminescent displays, teaching their young, solving problems to access food sources. "The singers are extinct," In said, her voice breaking. "We destroyed them through ignorance and greed. For 3,000 years they have carried this shame. We watch other species make classification decisions and we say nothing because we are cowards, but no more. The human child's courage shames us into honesty." One felt tears streaming down her face. Grandfather squeezed her hand gently. What humanity demonstrated with their crow is what we failed to see with the singers. That intelligence takes many forms. That our own limitations blind us to the minds of others. That calling something an animal is often just an excuse to exploit it without guilt. In turn to face X directly. "Scientist, your research is not wrong in its data, but it is wrong in its conclusions. You measured neural pathways and found them different from your own. You then assumed different meant inferior. This is the same mistake my people made." The chamber erupted into chaos, but In wasn't finished. "I am not the only one with confessions today. Before this session, 17 other species contacted me privately. They all have similar stories. Species they classified as animals that showed signs of intelligence, signs they ignored or explained away. One by one, representatives stood and spoke. A delegate admitted their livestock could count and recognized individual by sight, showing preference for kind handlers over cruel ones. A scientist presented suppressed research showing their world's pest species, teaching survival techniques across generations, passing knowledge that couldn't be purely instinctual. A military officer confessed that predators on their world demonstrated tactical coordination that suggested planning and communication beyond anything their classification allowed. Each confession led to more. Species that had been silent for centuries found their voices. The common theme was clear. They had all seen intelligence and chosen to ignore it because acknowledging it was inconvenient. X sat in his delegation seat, his shimmering skin cycling through colors rapidly. Finally, he stood. His 4 arms hung limply at his sides. "I owe humanity an apology," he said. His voice was quiet, stripped of its earlier arrogance. My research was meant to bring clarity to intelligence classification. Instead, I see now that I brought only my own bias. I looked at Earth's creatures and saw their differences from neural patterns. I stopped looking there. I didn't consider that different pathways might achieve similar or even superior results. He paused, his shimmer settling to a dull gray. My assistant brought evidence to me months ago that contradicted my conclusions. I buried it. I told myself it was flawed data. But the truth is, I buried it because I had already decided what the answer should be. I am a poor scientist and a being. I resign my position and submit myself for review. The humility in his voice was genuine. One felt a strange sympathy for him. He had been wrong, terribly wrong, but he was admitting it publicly. That took courage. Ambassador stood. The council should not accept Scientist X's resignation. We don't need punishment. We need change. We need scientists who can acknowledge their mistakes and learn from them. That's what real intelligence looks like. The ability to change your mind when presented with new evidence. The who had been so eager to humiliate humanity remained silent in his seat. His expression was unreadable. The council speaker's form pulsed thoughtfully. This assembly has heard compelling testimony. The question before us is not whether to reclassify Earth's fauna. The question is how to rebuild our entire framework for recognizing intelligence. One raised her hand. The gesture was noticed, and the speaker nodded permission for her to speak. "I'm just a kid," one said, her voice amplified through the chamber. "I don't understand all the science and politics, but I know this. Boram isn't special because she can solve puzzles. She's special because she's my friend. And you can't be friends with something that isn't intelligent." She took a deep breath. What if we stopped calling them animals and started calling them neighbors? What if we looked at every creature on our worlds and asked, "What are you trying to tell me?" instead of, "What can I make you do?" The simplicity of it seemed to strike something in the assembly. Beings who had been arguing fell quiet, considering. Dr. Sora stood to elaborate. "The child makes an excellent point. Our current classification system asks, do they think like us? But the question should be, do they think? Intelligence may express itself in ways we haven't imagined. Our job as scientists is to observe without the assumption of superiority." Over the next hours, the assembly worked to create something new. Representatives from dozens of species contributed ideas, drawing from their own experiences and regrets. Slowly, a framework emerged. The Galactic Neighbor Initiative was born. Its principles were simple. Every species would reassess the creatures on their worlds using new criteria, not comparing them to the observer's intelligence, but looking for signs of any intelligence at all. Problem solving, communication, cultural knowledge transfer, emotional complexity, creative expression. Protection would be established for any being showing signs of sentience, regardless of their technology level. Rights would be granted. Habitat preservation would become mandatory. And most importantly, communication research would be prioritized, learning to talk with neighbors rather than talking about animals. The vote was not unanimous. Some species resisted, worried about economic impacts or cultural disruption. But the majority voted yes. The galaxy had changed its mind. In the months that followed, the changes rippled outward. On Earth, dolphins were given seats on ocean conservation councils. Translation technology, developed by Eager who saw a new field opening before them, allowed their clicks and whistles to be interpreted. Their input on ocean health proved invaluable. Elephants were recognized as having sovereign territory. Human development could no longer encroach without permission from the herds, permission granted through careful observation of their behaviors and responses. Videos of solving complex puzzles became the galaxy's most popular entertainment, with betting pools on which species would solve each challenge fastest. A young girl started a movement to protect the pest species her people had persecuted. Within a year, those creatures were recognized as the planet's original inhabitants, and they began learning to share their world. They spent enormous resources trying to find any remaining singers in their oceans. They found none, but they did discover the ruins of singer settlements, structures and art that proved beyond doubt what they had lost. They turned these sites into memorial museums, teaching future generations the cost of their ancestors' blindness. 1 year after one's stand in the council chamber, she returned as Earth's junior ambassador for relations. At 13, she was the youngest official representative in galactic history. Her job was to help develop communication protocols for beings that didn't build starships. Boram came too, projected on a massive hologram. The crow sat on her fence post back in grandfather's garden, watching the assembly with bright, intelligent eyes. The agenda for this session was ambitious, reviewing preliminary communication successes with Earth cetaceans, discussing protection frameworks for newly recognized intelligences across 40 worlds, and establishing educational programs to help species overcome their cultural biases. But before the formal proceedings began, in approached the human delegation. She carried something in her crystalline appendages, a small, beautifully crafted sculpture made from materials native to the. This is made from singer-crafted coral, she explained to one. One of the few pieces that survived. I want you to have it, not as a gift but as a reminder that intelligence lost can never be recovered, that neighbors ignored become ghosts that haunt us forever. One accepted it carefully. The sculpture was beautiful, abstract but clearly intentional, obviously art created by a thinking mind. "I'll take care of it," one promised, "and I'll remember." As the session began, one looked around the chamber at hundreds of species, each now their own worlds with new eyes. Ships were being sent to study animals with fresh perspectives. Scientists were developing new observation techniques. Children on dozens of worlds were starting conversations with creatures their parents had never thought to speak to. The change wasn't complete. It would take generations. Some species would resist. Some creatures would prove to be just what they'd always seemed. But the door had been opened. The assumption of human or any single species had been challenged. Back on Earth, Grandfather Young tended his wild garden. Boram and her flock worked on puzzles together, while researchers from across the galaxy observed respectfully from a distance. The sanctuary had grown, expanded with funding from a dozen worlds eager to study Earth's newly recognized neighbors. Captain Wu brought his family's rescue dogs to demonstrate their abilities to a delegation of who were reconsidering their own world's canine equivalents. Dr. Sora led a team developing translation matrices for species without vocal language, working with creatures that communicated through color, movement, scent, or methods not yet understood. And in council chambers, research facilities, and wild spaces across the galaxy, beings looked at their neighbors with new questions. It's not "what are you," but "who are you?" It's not "what can you do for me," but "what can we learn together?" The revolution Boram started wasn't about proving that crows were smart. It was about proving that intelligence had been there all along, waiting for someone to notice, waiting for someone to care enough to look. One stood before the Galactic Assembly and delivered her first formal report. Her voice was steady, confident. She spoke about cooperation, empathy, and the courage to question everything you thought you knew. On the hologram behind her, Boram preened her feathers, the white star patch on her wing catching the light. She cawed once, the sound that meant friend, and across the galaxy, billions of beings heard it. They were listening now. Finally, they were listening.